And okay. And then you might say, hey, but biodiversity, we have protected areas for those, right? Yes, that's true. Protected areas are super, super important, and we cannot do without them, but they're simply not enough. So if you already look at chimpanzees and gorillas, 87% of all chimpanzees and gorillas lives outside of protected areas. If you look closer to home, orangutans, yeah, 78% live outside of protected areas. So we need those areas outside of those protected areas, and they have to be managed in such a way that we can also maintain the biodiversity in those areas. So some other issues with protected areas is that they're too scattered, so they're not connected. They're too reliable on funding that may drop. So conservation through protection is very important, but cannot do it alone. So that's why I focus my research on conservation through responsible production. Well, tropical forest, that's another part of my focus of my research. Now, why is that? Simply because they're so super important for the climate, for all kinds of ecosystem services, and also because they harbor 62% of all vertebrates in just a very, well, comparatively small area of land, 7% of the land mass. Now, what have I done during my career? Just so you get to know me a little bit. First, after graduating in Wageningen, like I think you did as well, I went to Suriname, and a country you're familiar with, and a very interesting country. And I worked there as a forestry scientist. So we looked at permanent forest plots, permanent sample plots, at how the forest recovered from logging and how the forest responds to climate change. And I'm happy to say in the field teams that I was working with, there were also people from Javanese descent, of course. So very interesting mix of cultures in that country, and it was really nice to live and work there for 2 years. After that, I moved to the Congo Basin, and specifically to Gabon and to Republic of Congo and to Cameroon. And why is that? Well, we started a new study. To answer the question whether FSC, certified forestry, so that's the label of sustainable forestry, right, really does what they promise. So they say, yeah, we have all these measures to protect the wildlife in the forestry concessions that we have. But we were like, okay, how do we really know unless we check it like really rigorously? So we set out to do that, and we went to those countries of the Congo Basin that I just mentioned. And you might wonder why specifically logging, why specifically FSC certification. That's simply because a quarter of all the logging, all the tropical forests that exist in the world is allocated to logging. So can you imagine that if you find a way to manage those forests well, how good it is for the positive impacts for biodiversity? So we installed hundreds of camera traps, and I didn't do that alone, of course. Went into the field with a lot of teams, and more teams, and more teams, and more teams, and more teams, and that, of course, resulted in a lot of nice data. And we're wildlife biologists, we like wildlife, so let's just have a look at some of the nice photos that we have. This is the data that we worked with: the giant pangolin, some chimps, some forest buffalo, a very dangerous animal, by the way. Yeah, some guenons, aardvark, really nice. And of course, also have a lot of intelligent animals. So this is a gorilla doing the chest beat, so that's a pretty cool observation, if you ask me. And also just nice to share, we had over 1 million photos, and each of those photos was annotated to the species level by students and assistants to get a real good image of the impacts of FSC certified forestry. So very intelligent animals in the forest, as you see. Wait, but I couldn't stay away from my cameras. And he's actually inspecting my camera. The video is a bit slow, but yeah, there we go. The slides are a bit slow, but that's okay. So just some nice observations. We had that study eventually finished, and we had some really nice results that showed that FSC certified forestry really helps wildlife. So we saw more gorillas, more elephants, more leopards, especially large, medium to large wildlife was more abundant in those FSC certified study concessions. Had it published in a nice journal, and then I moved on to Indonesia. Now, why is that? Yeah. Oh, just go back one slide. Because the study that we did in Africa made me think, okay, logging is an interesting commodity, but there are more challenging commodities. And I think palm oil is one of them. And where is palm oil produced in the world? Well, basically Indonesia, right? And in those palm oil areas, you also have so much biodiversity, all those unique species. But we again need to grow that palm oil because everybody uses it. So I always use some slides to show people that really don't know about the use of palm oil. And in Europe, people are like, yeah, well, why would we need it? Well, it's of course just a vegetable oil. And it's in almost all of our packaged products in the supermarket, or half. And it's simply the most efficient way of producing vegetable oil. So it's 5 times more efficient than the best alternative. So the best alternative needs 5 times more land to grow the same amount of oil. So if we, with the growing population that I just talked about, with the growing welfare, have 5 times more land, then we could do it, produce the same amount of oil with another crop, for example, rapeseed or sunflower seed or soy, but we don't have that land. So we cannot do without palm oil. So we have to find a way, and this is also just to show, okay, palm oil, this is the global expansion of production of palm oil over the last decades. Yeah, it's skyrocketing, and it's probably going to continue still. So I thought of a research idea that we have to combine the growth of palm oil with the conservation of wildlife in these high biodiversity areas like the tropical forest. So what do you have in palm oil plantation that still contains wildlife? Forest fragments. And that's the objective of the project that I came to Indonesia for, and that we started a very nice collaboration for with UGM, with Pa Imron, with Pa Hero, Prof. Satyawan, Ari, Susanti, you might know. Yeah. Am I still forgetting somebody? I don't think so. And we focus on the role of forest fragments. Now, why are these so interesting? Now, previously, it was generally thought that forest fragments are not useful for biodiversity in a landscape. So orangutans are generally translocated from forest fragments to larger forest blocks, and they were seen as deserts for biodiversity. But later on, it was realized that actually these forest fragments are often used by wildlife, and that animals also persist in these forest fragments. So sustainability standards like RSPO, ISPO, they recognize that, and they said things like fragments must be large enough to remain ecologically sustainable. Now that's very nice, I agree, but nobody really knows what is large enough. So when is a forest fragment still ecologically useful? And that's the core of this project. So for example, in 2 hypothetical graphs, you have a forest fragment that is isolated. So it's not isolated on the left, and it's getting more isolated on the right. And then on the y-axis, you have wildlife. Well, if it's more isolated, at some point you have a threshold where certain species cannot reach it anymore, and they'll go extinct. And we want to find that threshold for every species in the landscape. At the same time, of course, the fragment size is important for wildlife. So we want to find the threshold at which size a fragment is not relevant anymore for species to be useful in the landscape. Now, in paper, this looks really easy, but in practice, you come up with a lot of difficulties. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slides as well. But first, why do we want to have this information? Well, first of all, then we can say to RSPO, ISPO, hey, if you retain forest fragments, and if you retain that and that many at such levels of isolation, you might actually also retain your orangutans and other species. So we can give concrete advice. And with that, we can give species level recommendations for sustainable landscapes. So that's the ideal objective here. So we can say that forest fragment is still useful, the other one isn't. And thereby we can either conserve landscapes that are sustainable or restore landscapes, so with targeted restorations, to maximize biodiversity benefits of these forest fragments. Now, how do we do that? We use state-of-the-art monitoring methods because there are a lot of different methods, and we want to include as many taxa as possible. So previously in Africa, I used camera traps and some acoustics because bioacoustics is a super interesting technique. Sound contains so much information. Who here has experience with bioacoustics? I'm sure by Imran. One, two, yeah. Yeah, because it's Imran is the real expert on this topic. So he has so much interesting projects, so many interesting projects on elephants, birds, where you can use bioacoustics to really assess biodiversity. So how does it work? On the y-axis here, you see frequencies. So we speak generally under the 2000 kilohertz. But there are a lot of species that have vocalizations in higher frequencies. And this is simply time. So here you see all these signatures of animals vocalizing, and you can train a classifier to basically identify them, so you can count the species presence of these animals from sound. So there's so much data in sound. And yeah, we use camera traps. Oh, I think yeah. Wait, maybe I clicked too many times. I'll try and go back one slide, right? I'll stop, and otherwise it's gonna. Yeah, there we go. Camera traps and drones. And drones are also highly innovative techniques with so many applications. It's gonna really blow your mind. It's so interesting what you can do with it, and I'm super enthusiastic about that as well. Okay, so we set up partnerships, of course, first with UGM, with WWF, local authorities, palm oil companies. Yeah, we went around, and a lot of people joined in the project, and we have a really strong project now to investigate this topic. I refrain from clicking again. There we go. Because this is what it's basically about, right? So this is an aerial photo from a forest landscape in Kalimantan, and this landscape is being encroached or deforested for palm oil. And the decision on which areas in that landscape are really being deforested and which are not are they're human decisions, right? And if we give the right information to the people that make these decisions, like we as scientists can provide the numbers on which areas to retain for maximization of biodiversity benefits, yeah, we can really contribute to these effective policies. So that's the idea behind this project. Now that's all very nice, but who's going to do this? Well, PhD students, of course. So we have 3 PhD students in the project now. Thank you, Virada, in the Sartika Sari, sorry for the name, and Thomas van Schaik. And they're all working on a different methodological focus. So Venki is mostly using drones, Inda is mostly using bioacoustics, and Thomas is more in the site selection and camera trapping. And then we have a whole bunch of supervisors that I just mentioned by name as well. And yeah, now I see that I actually forgot one, Julia Jones. She's a professor in Bangor University, and she's also part on the supervision team. And yeah, everybody's expertise is combined to make this happen. Now it gets technical, because okay, it sounds really good, selecting forest fragments, measurements, making measurements of which animals are there, having gradients of forest fragments that are comparable. Oh, comparable. How do you get a fragment that is comparable? So in practice, that's really difficult. So here in Central Kalimantan, we select a lot of forest fragments with remote sensing. And then we have to know how comparable are they, because you can look at the impact of their size and levels of isolation, but there might also be other impacts, like the distance to a road or distance to a village, that might affect the wildlife populations in your forest fragments. So for this project, we developed a new approach to mitigate the confounding of those other covariates through optimization of sampling selection. And I think this is a very relevant topic for anybody that's doing research, because you can also apply it to other data sets. So it doesn't have to be forest fragments. It can also be, it can even be patients in a hospital, and you want to minimize the differences in age or differences in the time that they were, for example. So, because what are we talking about? We want to know the relationship between the size of a forest fragment and the amount of wildlife that it can sustain. But other variables, like I just mentioned, might obscure that relationship. So I thought it was interesting to share this because it's applicable for all of us, and we're currently using it to select our fragments as well. So we selected 550 fragments larger than 10 hectares based on GIS. And we attribute different covariate values to these fragments using remote sensing data. So think about the roundness of a fragment, or distance to a road, distance to a river. Then, if you have different set of variables, then it's very difficult if you have 10 covariates to select comparable fragments. Now, how do we do that? Because we want to minimize that variation in all those covariates, but we want to retain the variation in the variables of interest. So that's the challenge. So we select a random set of forest fragments, and we developed an algorithm that then compares these fragments. And then it takes out one or two fragments, and then it compares the set again. And then it looks for optimization or maximalization in the comparability of those covariates, and maximalization of the range of the variables of interest. And then we go back in another iteration with a couple of other fragments. So the algorithm just selects another fragment and sees whether the variation that we are interested in is actually bigger and the other variation is smaller. And then it just continues and continues and continues. And then eventually we come up to a final selection. Now, the problem is, if you do this, or if you have a computer do this, it simply crashes because you have like a trillion options, right? So we included something called simulated annealing. Well, that sounds quite difficult. It was for me. I was like, is this still the field of ecology? I don't know, but we need it, so we use it. It's quite nice. It makes very small steps every iteration. Like, okay, we take another fragment, check if the variation is larger or smaller. And then it also allows for worse selections sometimes to be accepted. Because otherwise, you can display it as local peaks. It can end up in a local peak of variation, and that looks like an optimum. But you still have to go back some step to explore other areas in the whole map of variation. So then we quickly explore the whole landscape of possibilities sequentially without doing it in all at once, so the computer doesn't crash, basically. Now, what happens to the variation in our fragments? We want there to be maximum variation in the variable of interest. So that's the size of the forest fragment. And all the other variation has to go down. And these are the number of iterations. And this is basically the standard deviation, so the amount of variation. Well, it goes down for all variables over multiple variations until iterations until it balances out. Well, simply to visualize whether it is effective, well, you can look at the size of the whiskers there on the plot, and then here you see the total data set. So this is the total variation in terms of habitat quality. Here it was defined as carbon density in the forest fragment. So this is the total variation. If you take 100 fragments, you're close to the total variation. It's totally random. But with our method, we really narrow down this variation. And then we did that for all covariates. Well, I'm not going to talk you through all these graphs, but it's just to show, wow, okay, without having to select them ourselves, we have comparable data set. So quite happy with that. So we call it global covariate balancing, minimizes variation across the samples. Thereby, basically, it isolates the relationships of interest. it increases our inferential ability, and yeah, it really makes our field work a lot more targeted, because we don't have to go into the field and then measure and then come back and then we check the covariates or the influence of covariates, for example, the distance to the rivers, and we see, oh yeah, but these sites are actually not comparable because some of them are right next to the river and they have a bigger impact on the amount of proboscis, for example. So we can apply this well in many different settings, like I said. So I think it's really interesting new development. In the bigger picture, yeah, it's of course very important to control your covariates if you do research, because otherwise it can explain your hypothesis in a different way. But an important takeaway is also that you cannot take all covariate influence away. So you have to focus on this thing. We do it now before we go to the field, but you have to focus on the influence of covariance throughout your research cycle. So you have to understand them first, what can be impacting your data, then how do you optimize your sampling with our method, and then later on you can also do statistical adjustments, like hierarchical modeling, for example. Okay, so I did the technical part first, because this was right after lunch, and it is a bit of a heavy topic, I know. And now I'll continue with thermal drone monitoring on orangutans, and I also talk a bit about acoustics to introduce this topic. So we use bioacoustics, camera traps, and drones. Camera traps we of course use for terrestrial mammals. Birds and bats we use passive acoustic monitoring. Yeah, they're partly overlapping in species coverage, but they both techniques have a unique ability to detect species as well. Now, for the bioacoustics, this is mostly Inda's work. We have a lot of work ongoing, like we're, for example, using bioacoustics to look at forest core, forest fragment core to edge, to see whether specialist species are also making use of the edge, and which species, how the community changes. We install the recorders at quite a height. And we calibrate at what distances the recorders can still hear certain sounds. So then we know something about the detection probability. So a lot of that stuff is happening. And then, of course, we have to train a classifier, because if you put up multiple recorders, you cannot listen to all the material yourself. So we have to train a computer to really identify these vocalizations. Now, how we roughly do that, I'll go through that in just a couple of slides. We go to Xenocanto, so it's a database with a lot of vocalizations. And we go to certain species that we're interested in to see whether there are vocalizations in that database. Generally, there are. We collect the bird call, and then we upload it to Arbimon. Arbimon is a free platform. You can use it to upload your acoustics data. And they have a really nice feature called pattern matching. So you can run that pattern matching on your data. So you have a recording from the forest, you have a vocalization from the database, and then it looks for similar vocalizations in your data. In that way, you can find a local sample, so that has similar background noise as your complete data set. And then this is what it looks like, basically, pattern matching. You can run the pattern match classifier, and then you can select the findings like, oh, these are actual that species, others are not. And that way you can find more training data in your data. So you manually validate whether there are actual the species that you're interested in. And it's really quite quick and really simple. So anybody can do that, and then you can have another like bird expert validate your findings really quickly. So you really optimize your time and efficiency. So then you have a lot of training data, and you can use some samples found by pattern matching, but also other samples that look like it, but are then annotated as non-target species. So you actually train complete a nice training data set. You can then export that to Raven Pro to inspect the vocalizations even more. But to go through all this whole pipeline, a lot of people that my students, often had trouble finding the right steps and understanding the whole process. So I've been writing a paper with a student to just outline all these steps, how long they take for a single species, what things you should do for that, and the paper is still in review. But I think this is what sums it up. And acoustic data, you create a template. So from Xenocanto, just like I just showed you, you do a match detection, you validate the matches, and it really doesn't take that long. I mean, in total, of course, for one species, it takes you maybe a week, but then you have your classifier. And then in the next step, we use transfer learning. So that's a relatively new machine learning approach, where we use the base layers of a known global model. So, whoa, what does that mean? BirdNet, for example, they have a model that's trained on thousands and thousands of for thousands of species, a lot of data, and it's a neural network. And a neural network basically has different layers. And the base layers, they don't really recognize like the species itself, but they do recognize certain attributes. So it's in these frequency ranges, they have such amplitude differences, things like attributes of these vocalizations that are the same for all these species. Now, if you train a new neural network, you need a lot of data, like 10,000 samples, for example, to create good base layers again. But if you take those base layers from an existing neural network, like in a BirdNet that has been trained for another area in the world, doesn't matter, but has the same characteristics, you can then fine-tune those base layers with your own data, and you need a lot less data because you don't have to train those base layers anymore. So that's basically what it comes down to. And they call that transfer learning, and that's what we use then. So we train a CNN model, and that's what is written here. Compress local training data into feature vectors with BirdNet's pre-trained architecture. So in this paper, we're describing all of that. I think that's quite interesting. If you want to know more, I can send it to you. Let me know. And then, you run your model, you train a model. You can train it for as many species as you like. So we tested this for species in Mexico, actually. And we trained it for 24 seed dispersing birds. And it was one student project in the end. So yeah, it's quite interesting that we can do this so quickly these days. And then you have to evaluate your model. So that's basically the whole pipeline that you have to go through in machine learning for bioacoustics. But then you have these guys, and they don't vocalize very often, right? So the males vocalize sometimes, but the smaller ones and the females don't vocalize very loudly. And it's very difficult to capture them with bioacoustics. Same time, they don't go down to the ground a lot. So they stay up in the trees. So either you put up your camera traps in the trees, a lot of work. People do that, but it's like a lot of work. And especially if you look at the scale of the project that we have, we want to really have a lot of data. So yeah. So you need other methods. And this is actually the first output of our project, is that we reviewed the monitoring methods for orangutans. And it's, I think, a very nice paper because it compares bioacoustics, human observations, camera traps, and drones for orangutans specifically. And you can go to it and learn basically what the advantages are of each of these methods, but also the challenges. Now, after we did this, we were quite sure that we needed another method because orangutans are generally monitored with line transects, ground surveys. Who did a ground survey once, like line transect? I guess some people, right? Yeah. So yeah. Okay. And ground surveys are slow because you have to walk through the forest and you have to set a line and then you have to observe for all the nests. So they're expensive because you have to do that with a team and you have to go often to remote places and then stay there, and it takes a whole day. They're indirect because you count the nests and not the orangutans themselves. And the problem is also like, okay, they're inaccurate because nests, okay, the way it works, an orangutan makes a nest every day. Chimps and gorillas do as well, by the way. And then you count those nests because you know the production rate. But you have to estimate or calculate or through experimentation find out how long the nest remains visible. Because if you know that, then you know, okay, it's produced every day. It remains visible, for example, 200 days. But that depends on humidity and temperature and all kinds of factors. So it's varying. And then you can calculate the density of your orangutans. So it's very inaccurate because we don't know that nest decay rate. That's the big problem with that method. I have to say though, there are all these disadvantages, but they're also fun. So this was last week in Kalimantan. We did some line transects. And of course, in the peat forest, yeah, you get wet. So, and just to add, this is how it works. You walk a line and you try to detect or observe all the nests, calculate the distance or measure the distance. And then with that distance, you basically calculate the density away from the line and you extrapolate that to the area. Common thermal drone surveys. This allows us to count the orangutans directly. So that's not indirect. But yeah, it's a new technique. And are we going to use it in our project? So one of the first projects, chapters of one of the PhDs was to investigate whether we can use this. Now, I want to explain a little bit more about that. And then I think my time is up as well. Okay. No, wait. I've already clicked. Does it work there? Oh, yeah. So this is a video. If you go to the start of the video, can you do that maybe there? Oh, okay. There you go. You see, at the start of the video, you totally don't see the orangutan, but you just see a small dot on the screen. So that's the power of thermal, because you really see the difference in the landscape. Whereas with an optical camera, you would have to go way closer, so you can't cover a large area. I'll go to the next slide. Yeah, I have a few videos, but they're quite heavy, and maybe I should have compressed them. So for this one, you don't only observe orangutans with it. So I'm not sure if the video is going to allow it, but the first one who guesses which animal we observe here gets a coffee from me afterwards. You can just shout it if you recognize it. Huh? Yeah. Tunga, you get the coffee. Oh, but wait, you were looking at that screen. Yeah. So it's not fair for you guys. Sorry. Anyway, I thought it was a really nice observation to see sun bear right up in the trees, right? So, and that's also the benefit. Well, we don't only count the nests, but we see many other species as well. But of course, this sounds really easy and fun. Can you go to the next slide? But it gets more technical, right? Because we have to know a little bit more about how well this method works. And I wanted to share some really thrilling, if you ask me, insights about our data so far. So this is what it looks like, right? So yeah, biodiversity monitoring in 2026. You just sit behind a laptop at 5 o'clock in the morning behind your car on a road. That's all different from doing line transects. And you fly that drone. Now, why so early? Because, well, we're not allowed to fly before the sun comes up, but we can't fly too late because the canopy heats up. And if the canopy is too hot, there's no thermal signature anymore because it's just as warm as the animal itself. Yeah, I think. Oh yeah. So I just had some impressions of what it looks like. This is the landing pad, and I'll go to. Well, I'll just ask you to do the slides too, guys. Is that all right? Okay. Then next slide, please. Oh yeah. And this is what it looks like on the controller. So you can do an optical view and then and a thermal view, and then on the next slide. Yeah, this is probably also my computer being slow. So here in the thermal view, you see the hottest point. So if we see something like alive, it goes there, you see automatically, oh, it's a lot hotter than the rest. Whereas in the optical view, you still don't see anything. Okay, and then you see things like flight parameters, what is the altitude, how far are we away, and this is the flight path that we scheduled beforehand. So we have a forest fragment, and we basically gave it a flight path to follow, and that's all part of the protocol that we developed. Okay. Oh yeah, so here again, you see what it looks like if you have an observation. And yeah, next slide. You can zoom in a bit then, and we can actually observe the individuals. And so maybe it works for me again now. Okay. Yeah. So what are our research goals here? Well, we wanted to compare them to line transects. Yeah. So what are the density that we find with line transects, and what are the densities that we find with the thermal drones? How do environmental factors affect our observations? How is the consistency of the drone counts across repeated surveys? Because we have to know, is this a reliable method or not? And yeah, compare those abundances. And we also wanted to compare costs, because of course a drone costs money, but yeah, time with a whole field team costs money as well. So yeah. Okay. So I'll quickly go through those slides. Yeah. What we realized is that thermal detections decrease with time. And so the later it gets, the lower the detection rate per minute. Pretty logical, because as it gets later, it gets warmer, right? And that's also what you will see in the next graph. So this is the temperature of the orangutans. And then you also have the temperature when it's cloudy and when it's sunny. And you see, okay, when it's sunny, then it gets hot really quickly. And when it's cloudy, you can stay and keep on monitoring for a bit longer. Now, okay, but that's not really good for a protocol, right? Because you can't say like, oh yeah, when it's cloudy, you can monitor till 10 o'clock. So we need a different parameter that we can use to standardize monitoring detection probability. And that's basically temperature, because that's what's really defining this. So we looked at detection probability over different temperatures. And then we got this graph, and we identified that there was a cutoff, a breakpoint at 26.7 degrees. So after 26.7 degrees, the detection probability went down a lot. So it doesn't matter whether it's sunny or whether it's cloudy. You have to just get the canopy temperature, and we do that every 10 minutes. And we check, how warm is it? And then if it's warmer than 26.7 degrees, well, you might as well go home, because your detection probabilities go down. And now, last week actually, while we were in the field, we always saw this optimum here, which is strange, right? Because you kind of expect it to go down, because the earlier, the colder it gets. But we were there really early one day, and we found less orangutans than the day before, and that was like a bit later. And then we were like, oh, Eureka, now we understand it. The orangutans were still sleeping. So yeah, their behavioral insights are also important, and many of their nests are just below the canopy, so you don't really see them. And if you don't see them, if they're sleeping, then yeah, well, you get the lower detection probability, and canopy temperature doesn't matter. So that's, yeah, you know, as we're doing the research, we get these insights, and I think this is really valuable information, also for future monitoring of orangutans, because let's have a look. Yeah, no, yeah, that's okay. Survey consistency is a bit of a problem, because sometimes we went to a fragment and we saw 1, and then second day 1, 1, and then 0, 0, and then 2, 2. All right, okay, here is more consistent. So we need to do this in a lot of fragments to find out how many days you need to survey, basically, in order to get a consistent max count. Because that's what you don't want to know. You don't want to miss anything. So the mean doesn't really matter. We want to know the max amount, because those are all your orangutans. So that's what we're doing now, repeating those findings, repeating those forest fragments. And then, and now we got to this data. And I am so super enthusiastic about this graph. Why? On the x-axis, you see the fragments, different fragments, forest fragments. And on what is it, orange? Yeah, you see the density of orangutans as calculated based on line transects in those fragments at the same time as we did the drone surveys. And then we used the drones in the same fragments, and we compared them to the max counts. And what you basically see is that we have, on average, 5 times more orangutans with drones than with the line transects that we calculated. And that is wild, because the line transects is something that we have always relied on as an effective method for orangutan densities, right? But apparently, there are many more orangutans. And of course, line transects were the best we had, so it couldn't have been done any different. But this is a really nice example of, I think, innovation and technological development that provides new insights. And now maybe you say, yeah, but what decay rate did you use? Because if you use the decay rate of the nest and you use a longer decay rate, for example, 260 to 86 days, if you use a longer decay rate, your nest remain visible for longer. You get a different density estimate. So we used the longest decay rate possible to get to that estimate. Okay. I think, yeah. German drone considerations. Now I still have like 5 minutes or something, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So these are some things that I wanted to share. Like, consistency is challenging. Because here again, you see example of the canopy at 5:43 and at 8:39. Yeah, you see it looks totally different in a thermal view. The canopy temperature is therefore very important. And we have identified now, but maybe that number will slightly change still with additional data. With more higher temperature, we cannot use it anymore. So there's only a short window in the morning that you can use this technique. You have to wake up early, and then you have the rest of the day to do, well, your analysis or something like that. Cloudy conditions optimize basically the sampling, because you can stay out for longer. And oh yeah, okay. So far we have identified that we need 4 to 6 repetitions. So it's not that cheap if you have to go there 4 to 6 times compared to line transects. We see similar cost so far. So that's also an interesting insight. And you can cover up to 70 hectares with a drone in one morning. So you may wonder, like, hey, is this a new standard for orangutan monitoring? Hey, the video is actually working quite well. So we have live video evidence, so we can actually validate our densities by looking at the individuals and comparing them with the previous estimates, observations. So we can also take behavioral observations from this. And for example, which tree species are they using? What are they doing there? yeah, so there's additional data that we can gather from this same data. Oh, we have higher abundance estimates so far. It's cost well, and relatively time efficient because you need fewer people at least. Yeah, and maybe 5 times more orangutans than we previously thought. Now, does that mean that orangutans are doing very well? I don't think so. So that's a very careful consideration as well, right? Okay, maybe we can measure them in a different method and it provides us different numbers, but still orangutans have lost, well, what is it? So much of their habitat, the areas that they need. They're still very susceptible to climate change impacts. Their habitat is being fragmented and lost at a rapid pace still. So it's not like the orangutan is safe, but we might have a better method and we're still working on this. And I think that's a very nice thing to share at least. And then just 2 more slides, I think, about other things that we can do with these drones. Because now that we have a drone, we want to use it, right? So the really cool thing that we're working on now as well is mapping the canopy. Because basically now forest quality is being assessed through carbon density. Is there more carbon? Then it's an older forest. Then we assume that the forest is of higher quality. But in fact, in the fragmented landscapes that we're working in, so in Central Kalimantan, there's a lot of palm oil, other land uses. It's already quite a nice finding that we do find a lot of orangutans in that landscape, right? So apparently they can persist in the landscape. But then we still want to know, hey, are these forest fragments providing food the whole year through? Are they providing nesting opportunity the whole year through? Or should we target restoration for certain species that they miss because maybe in the dry season they don't have food or something like that? For that, we need to efficiently identify tree species. Now, with the drone, we thought, let's try it with the drone. And we're still working on this, so this is a work in progress. We use the RGB, so the optical drone photos, to make basically one image of a forest fragment. It's called an orthomosaic. So we paste a lot of images in rows next to each other, and then we have a nice GPS linked image of a forest fragment. Then we use a method called Salva box. It's for automated tree crown detection. So, oh yeah, this is a tree crown, that's a tree crown. And then we refine that with SAM2. That's actually a segmentation model by Meta, the company, Facebook company, to identify tree crowns in the fragment. Yeah, then we have to classify the species, like which species do we see in those segmented forest fragments. And if we can do that, but we're still working on that, we can map tree species in a forest fragment. And of course, we cannot do that for all the species, hundreds of species that you have in Indonesia, but we can at least do it for some very important species for orangutans to start off with and then improve the model. But let's start with the proof of principle. So just what does it look like? We have this RTK base station, and this allows us to really have a very accurate GPS measurement of each tree. So each tree that we have identified, classified, or segmented in like in the previous pictures, has a centroid, and we provide it with a GPS location. And then this is a picture from our data. We get these fairly accurate segments of tree crowns. Pretty cool, if you ask me. It looks really nice. So I hope the subsequent classification will also be strong or like good. And then this is also a video. Is it working on your screen? What we see here is basically oh yeah, wait. I'll explain a little bit before. So we have a forest fragment. We mapped all those trees, segmented them, gave you a centroid to all these trees. And then we selected only the tallest trees above 25 meters. And from those, we took a random sample of 250 trees per fragment. Why? Yeah, just because we needed close-up photos of the canopy for a lot of different trees. But then you have to fly to all those trees. No, it's even more easy. We can just program the drone to fly to all those centroids And that's what you basically see here. So now we can turn on the video. The drone flies to a tree. This is a centroid. It goes there, makes a photo at different heights, like zooms in. So now it will zoom in. That's the tree crown. And now it's finished because it's got its photos, 3 photos per tree. And it will look for the next nearest point. And this way we can gather a lot of data. Okay, so there are points in the horizon, as you see. And yeah. So these are the people that we're working with. And then you basically get a lot of data, all these tree crowns. And that's what we look at with we look at that data with a botanist. And we've identified a certain number of target species. We check whether there are lianas in the tree crowns and other things that can, obscure the classification result. And yeah, now we are training a model with all that data, hundreds, well, thousands of points, basically to detect a couple of tree species. And with that, we can then fly over a fragmented landscape and say, okay, yeah, this is the real quality, at least for orangutans. And this is just the start of it. You can think of other questions that you can answer with this technique. So I'm also really enthusiastic about this method. And yeah, and might be a nice small note, and that's also science. We never thought of this application 2 years ago, right? So we started a project on fragmentation. We have this new method with the drone. And as we have progressing insights, we have other ideas, change the scope of a PhD, go for it. And that's science. And I think that's also one of the really nice and motivating things, reasons to be in science. So yeah, to explore like these new opportunities. I think there might be still one slide. Oh. Yeah, so this is basically what we then get. Like we have photos, close-up photos of all these tree crowns. Here you see some more segments. And this is what it looks like in the database. And you can really clearly see, okay, that's this species. And we already identified species that were always, always when orangutans were observed, they were in a certain tree species that is flowering now. We walked through the forest, we tasted the flower. It was indeed very sweet. So yeah, very nice method. I think the last slide then. And that's thank you very much for your attention slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joeri. I think we learned a lot from Joeri's presentation, and I would like to welcome question from audience, Mbak Fadil, and Mas, you may use bahasa, and I can help you to translate.
Thank you for the change. Hi Yuri, my name is Fadila. I have attended on several seminars on bioacoustic, and I know from that seminars that bioacoustic can be applied to biodiversity assessment, study migratory pattern, and so on, and also to identify the individual through their vocalization structure to know their population. Yeah, but I have a question for you. Can bioacoustic identify the reproductive success on individual species, on individual through their vocalization structure? Because I mean, how bioacoustic may contribute to this case, like directly or indirectly, because I need to know about the rate survival of Malukan scrub vole, and I'm not sure what method I have to use, whether bioacoustic, bird banding, or I have to install the GPS telemetry on this species. I don't know. So I need your input maybe for me. Okay, just 2 questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so in any case, bioacoustics is not very invasive, so that's a benefit of this method, right? Because if you use like tags, then it will be, I think your sample size will be a lot smaller potentially. Uh, but yeah, I don't know much about the specific case that you're thinking about. Um, but if your animals vocalize frequently and loud enough to be heard, like from a couple of meters, I would say it's you could always use bioacoustics. You can just train a model specifically for that species. That will also reduce the number of false positives because you don't get a lot of false identifications because it's only focused on your species, so it knows that species really well and doesn't. Yeah, the rest is like not that species. So then a model thinks in that way. It can train one class or two classes or 25 classes, but if you just specify it to one species, then it just has two classes, your species and not that species, right? So I think then yeah, the question you have to ask yourself is the model training is not the problem. If they vocalize frequently enough, do they do that? Do they make enough noise? But mm-hmm. Yeah. Uh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Movement is difficult. Yeah. Because the location is very difficult with sound. So we've tried things with triangulation, for example, in French Guyana next to Suriname for howler monkeys, and then it was really difficult because um, first of all you need a acoustic recorder with an accurate GPS logger, and yeah, those are a bit more expensive, but also yeah, the modeling. I don't know. For us, it was quite challenging. Um, so I would say then maybe it's better to tag them. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I'm thinking about detecting not the adult one, but the chick. Yeah, the chick of the bird probably can have yeah, on the nesting ground can be. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the survival is just simply that if they still make a noise, then it's still survive. Otherwise, it's just die. But
Individual identification is possible for some animals, but usually not for birds. And yeah, yeah. So, but you could, of course, check in multiple habitats to see if you hear them, if they're recognized. That's a possibility. If you want to not know the individual movement, but the habitat use, whether the species occurs in different habitats at all, that would be a good application of the method. Um, otherwise, yeah.
Terima kasih Pak Imran. Hello, Professor Joeri. So I'm not a student. I am worlds apart from being a wildlife expert. So my name is Andreas. I work for Satelligence, also based in Utrecht, the company. Um, you mentioned quite nicely, as the title as well, Professor, regarding supply chain, right? Regarding commodity supply chain. So what I'm working as a satellite provider, a satellite monitoring provider for these companies doing monitoring is that nature positive supply chain covers multiple dimensions, be it deforestation free, commitments, carbons, and also including biodiversity. You mentioned also the FSC certified forest you worked on previously. And having served as certification auditor myself in the past, we've learned that certification is a nice enabling condition, but definitely not the sole solution towards nature positive, right? We've seen some greenwashing concerns happen lately. On the other hand, leading downstream companies pledging to frameworks like the TNFD, for instance, they cover massive amount of commodity supply chains, multiple geographies, and they need to deliver what they commit. So my rather practical question is, how visible do you think your methodology and also algorithm to be scalable at both cross-species nature, be it tiger, elephant, or jaguar in Latin America, and also at the landscape level, be it palm oil supply bases in Indonesia, Malaysia, cocoa in Western Africa, soy in Latin America. Hence, if that is scalable, it could possibly create a landscape level biodiversity baseline, which could probably lead to habitat fragmentation metrics that could change due to deforestation detection, which what I'm doing. That would be my rather practical question. Thank you.
Just one question. Then you refer to the site selection algorithm or the monitoring?
Both.
Okay. Say hi to Niels, by the way.
Yeah.
I have a collaboration with your company. So for this project, we use your data. Yeah, so your land use data, we have access to it, and yeah, very nice. I was in the office, yeah, with one of the PhD students a few months ago. So, yeah, yeah. So thanks for that. I'm a big fan of those landscape approaches that you alluded to. I think it's very ambitious. But in the end, it's one of the only ways I think we can move to a really sustainable landscapes if we use a landscape lens, both in terms of governance, but also in finance, and then also in terms of biomonitoring, because we need to validate the impacts of whatever is being done in a landscape by actors that say they have sustainable supply chains and all that. With actual biomonitoring results, right? I think landscape approaches are good, but we're not there yet. It's still far away from reality now, right? Because we have all these fragmented owners and they're not collaborating. But that's I think a different story. I think multiple things that I discussed here can be relevant for validation of biodiversity impacts here. I think first the site selection, because the problem nowadays with monitoring is that a lot of monitoring is being done, okay, a little bit here, a little bit there, and then basically it doesn't provide the answers we really need, right? Like, is the impact that we see, or is the biodiversity that we see, is it really the result of some policy or some management level? And having the right site selection really focused on sites with a certain management type versus sites that don't have a certain management type, to really have the inferential ability to say, okay, this is working or not, is extremely important, but basically missing from the whole debate. So yeah, I think that's a key innovation that is required for landscape approaches to work, and sustainable supply chains then as well. Because as you say as well, certification doesn't always work, and partly that's because one certified concession can be an island, right? So it's an island, and maybe they do the right thing, but if the neighbors and everybody around them doesn't do the right thing, the animals don't know that the concession stops somewhere, right? So yeah, so you need that landscape lens, and then you need to have very efficient, cost-effective monitoring approaches. Because if it's not scalable, if it's very costly, then it won't be done at a large scale, and then you never get the data that you need. So that's what we're working on through automation with, for example, these classifiers for animals that can be detected automatically with sound recordings, or with quick scans with drones. And I think that will allow standardized monitoring in larger landscapes, and thereby provide, you could call them bio KPIs, right? Like, that you really have to show, okay, our biodiversity is doing well. That unlocks money, access to sustainable financing, for example, right? Yeah, and that can be integrated in the Intelligence platform then, and we can provide it. So let's collaborate more. Yeah, thanks for the question.
There is a question from the Zoom, from the team. Siapa? Hilang. Hiding. Chat in chat. Siapa? Please open your mic. Ditunjukin siapa? Fahri.
Okay, hi. Good
Yeah.
afternoon, everybody. Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
please.
Can you hear my voice? Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fahri. I really love what you do with Indonesian vulnerable species, endangered species, including orangutan, right? Because I really have same what is the name? Same research topic. I work for Tertiary is one of the smallest primate in Indonesia, and my question is, can we use this thermal methodology using drone with the smaller species size like Tertiary? So you mentioned about the orangutan, right? But what if this methodology is in different species like Tertiary? Because Tertiary, yeah, they live in the shrub and in the trunk and the fall of the maybe like a stone. It's not in the canopy. Is it possible? And second is about bioacoustic. I really love how you do with your bioacoustic. I have some research too, and in bioacoustic, I want to ask you about the noise. I really wondering if the noise is like maybe it's like an early detection of for early detection for forest degradation. Can we add it, or can we hear it about? Can we hear it maybe I'm sorry, like a forest degradation? Maybe can we hear it about hear the chainsaw or the forest degradation? You know what I mean? I really know first talking to you, but yeah, that's my second question.
Yeah, thank you very much for those questions. Yeah, Tarsius, if they're not in a canopy, I'm not sure if drones can be effective, and they're also quite small. I mean, I think it would be effective for hornbills and other really like top of the canopy species. But while you were asking your question, I thought maybe actually because they're nocturnal, right, and difficult to observe in general, just having a handheld thermal camera could really help your efficiency in monitoring them during night transects or something like that. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's been used already, but yeah, in a different way. But Imran has more experience on this topic, so I suggest. But yeah, it sounds really maybe nice to also use that like during night transects or something like that. And then the second question, whether noise can be a predictor of disturbance and whether we can identify anthropogenic impacts or sounds. Yes, definitely. Especially like there are gunshot and chainsaw detectors. You can even link them to like a satellite-based communication connection, so you don't have to have like network, and you can actually, well, use them as a warning system, like, hey, there's a gunshot or there's a chainsaw. It automatically classifies that sound and then sends a signal to some computer with rangers or somewhere to basically send like anti-poaching or something like that. And Payamron is also working on that, and he has actually developed, and that's quite impressive, as a whole own system with recorder and onboard processing unit for the classification of whatever you want to classify. So there can be a certain species or human anthropogenic noise, gunshot, and then it sends it over the LoRa satellite network without network connection. So you can do it everywhere. And then you can basically get informed about the activities of illegal activities in a forest, or or the presence of highly protected species, things like that. So that's a possibility. And then when you asked about the noise, then you're talking basically about the background noise or all the sounds together in bioacoustics is what we call the soundscape. And the soundscape can also be analyzed not on a species level, but in an aggregated way. So you have to calculate basically a mathematical summary over the soundscape, and it can show you something about the diversity or the intensity of the frequencies that are being used, or the saturation of the soundscape, or other aspects that you can highlight. And these things can say something about whether a forest is degraded or not. But I have to, you have to be a bit cautious with those approaches, because they're really context dependent. So, for example, some of these indices, they promise, okay, if you have more saturation, then you have more species. And there's a theory behind it, because species have evolved next to each other. So if you make the same sound, then you cannot hear each other, you cannot mate, and you cannot warn each other. So you make a different sound. So yeah, indeed, if you have more species, you have higher saturation. If you have higher saturation, you have more species. But on the other hand, if you have a degraded system and all your insectivorous birds are gone, you have more insects, and insects make more sound than birds, so you also have more saturation. So you have to be very careful with those things, and the interpretation gets really difficult. But they can be interesting. I think we're also using them now for quantifying edge effects. So do we hear a different soundscape on the edge than in the center of the forest? And if we see a different soundscape consistently, then we can use that as a stepping stone to the next thing. What makes up the difference in sound? Which species do we have to look at? So it's basically like a principal component analysis for your data. You can explore data a little bit with it. So thanks for those questions. And and let me know about the handheld thermal device for Tarshish. Sounds cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Joeri. I'm afraid that we have to switch to next agenda, but let us give applause to Joeri. Thank you very much, Joeri. So for those who have a question, I think Joeri will be stay here for a couple hours or minutes. You can ask him directly. So the next is I would like to. I think we have also here Mas. Already there. Mas Haikar.
Ya, Pak Imron.
Oke, saya share dulu sebentar ya tentang double degree dulu, nanti baru Mas Haikar ya. Oke, saya pakai bahasa Indonesia aja untuk ini. Ini sedikit agenda tambahan, terutama nanti teman-teman yang belum S3, yang mau S3, ini ada kesempatan bagus sekali karena saat ini kita sedang kerjasama dengan Utrech University. Kita mendapatkan kesempatan untuk bisa membuka double degree antara Utrech dan UGM. Nah, double degree ini akan didanai dari LPDP, maka nanti Mas Haikar akan memberikan menceritakan sedikit bagaimana pengalamannya dalam apply di LPDP. Ya, next. Ya, ini kalau teman-teman ingin mempelajari lebih lanjut, silakan nanti melihat langsung di sini. Ada bagian khusus di LPDP yang membahas tentang double degree dan joint degree. Syarat-syaratnya terlampir di situ. Silakan bisa perdalam. Tapi saya ingin menyampaikan beberapa hal, terutama terkait syarat umumnya saja dan juga nanti topik-topik yang bisa nanti apply untuk skema ini. Jadi next. Jadi skema ini sebenarnya kalau di double degree di Fakultas Kehutanan ini ada dua, satu di master, yang satu di doktoral. Jadi yang master ini kerjasama dengan Kuliah University, cuma bidangnya nampaknya bukan di konservasi, jadi ada di bidangnya lain. Jadi saya tidak bisa banyak bercerita. Yang akan saya ceritakan yang untuk LPDP yang doktoral ilmu kehutanan. Jadi kita skema yang kita tawarkan kali ini adalah tema-tema, topik-topik yang terkait dengan konservasi biodiversitas dan juga nanti landscape yang tadi sempat diceritakan oleh Joeri juga ya. Nah, ya ini beberapa teknis nanti ketika mungkin poin yang terakhir yang ingin saya tekankan. Jadi syaratnya nanti bagi aplikan harus sudah punya LOE. Kalau di keterangannya baik di Fakultas Kehutanan UGM maupun nanti atau di Utrech. Jadi bisa salah satu yang kemudian nanti bisa apply di situ. Jadi ini bagian yang tak kalah penting. Nah, untuk dapat LOE ini kan juga perlu tahu nih kira-kira pembimbingnya senangnya mau kemana nih penelitiannya. Nah, next. Ini potensial topik yang kita tawarkan. Jadi topik-topik ini yang harapannya nanti calon PhD ini akan masuk dengan topik ini. Yang pertama, kebetulan kami dengan tadi teknologi drone dan teknologi bioakustik dan lain sebagainya, kami tertarik untuk mengembangkan tema atau topik-topik penelitian yang terkait dengan human wildlife conflict to coexist. Ini kalau study site, kebetulan saya juga di WWF, jadi ada satu akses khusus ke sana, jadi kami berharap nanti bisa kontribusi di Aceh maupun di Jambi. Kemudian ya tadi tema tadi itu juga masih berlanjut conservation technologies, terutama untuk menggunakan drone dan bioakustik. Nah, kemudian yang juga terkait dengan isu-isu yang saat ini berkembang di Indonesia, yang mungkin teman-teman mendengar area preservasi, saya kira ini bagian juga tema yang menarik untuk dipelajari karena saat ini sedang disiapkan pengembangan area preservasi, tapi tentu saja butuh tool dan lain sebagainya. Kami ingin masuk ke skema itu untuk terutama kita melihat seberapa jauh peran area preservasi dalam tadi mendukung biodiversity conservation. Karena tadi kalau yang temanya yang ditawarkan Joeri tadi kan kalau sudah jadi landscape production kemudian diajukan jadi area preservasi, kira-kira nanti dampaknya seperti apa. Nah yang berikutnya yang keempat, ini nanti site-nya agak paling timur, jadi kami tertarik nanti untuk melihat konteksnya biodiversity dan indigenous people, nanti di wilayahnya kita harapkan bisa diaplikasikan di Papua. Tapi dengan tadi siang kami juga sempat diskusi, nampaknya nanti bisa di mix juga dengan tema yang tadi disampaikan Joeri, bahwa kami ingin melihat apakah ketika nanti semakin banyak wilayah dirubah jadi hutan menjadi non hutan, apakah somehow di level tertentu akan meningkatkan keanekaragaman hayati. Karena kita juga lihat seringkali di dalam hutan ketika ada disturbance atau gangguan ini malah memancing satwa itu untuk muncul. Nah ini juga kami pengen tahu seberapa jauh, kalau tadi Joeri pengen tahu seberapa besar patch yang tersisa, ini juga pengen tahu seberapa besar fragmentasi itu diperbolehkan. Nah ini kurang lebih akan lari ke sana. Kemudian, nah ini juga temanya juga sebenarnya tidak terbatas pada tema-tema yang saya dan Joeri saja, tapi juga karena ini grup researcher ya. Jadi di tim kami nanti ada Pak Heru, ada Prof Satiawan juga yang bisa berkontribusi di situ. Di sana juga selain Joeri ada Meraike yang juga punya topik-topik penelitian. kami juga punya interest untuk kontak ini, translating science insight into practical conservation. Ini lebih ke ya practical conservation, tapi mengukur seberapa efektif hasil-hasil dari kerja-kerja sains itu ditranslasikan dalam bentuk misalnya kebijakan, dalam bentuk peraturan, ataupun bahkan mungkin apakah dipakai untuk pertimbangan untuk nyusun rencana pembangunan daerah atau ini pengen kita gali lebih lanjut di situ. Kemudian nah ini adaptability national biodiversity monitoring approach for landscape conservation ini sebenarnya menindaklanjuti apa yang sudah disampaikan Joeri juga. Jadi kita pengen tahu kalau misalnya nanti dibuat standarisasi monitoring, kira-kira buy-in dari perusahaan, buy-in dari bahkan mungkin kalau kita mungkin koperasi mau nggak mereka diukur menggunakan metode ini, mau nggak mengadopsi metode ini untuk pengukuran biodiversity di sana. Kemudian yang tadi terkait dengan FSC, ini juga salah satu tema penting yang kami lihat juga di masa yang akan datang akan cukup berperan penting adalah remedi. Jadi remedi ini sampai saat ini kan masih dalam proses negosiasi, tapi di Indonesia sudah mulai ada perusahaan yang tertarik untuk melakukan remedi, terutama environmental remedy. Nah ini nanti bagaimana mungkin selain remedi juga nanti kalau program-program restorasi itu dampaknya kepada biodiversity conservation itu dampaknya seperti apa? Kita pengen tahu ke arah situ. Dua yang terakhir ini agak broader, tapi ini juga kemarin requestnya Prof. Satiawan. Prof. Satiawan tertarik untuk melihat sebenarnya conservation finance, jadi upaya mendukung pendanaan konservasi itu tantangannya apa? Pembatas yang membuat dia tidak bisa dijalankan di lapangan itu apa? Dan ini bisa dijadikan satu topik penelitian untuk PhD. Dan yang terakhir ini mungkin nanti juga akan terkait dengan tawaran dari Pak Hero ya. Jadi konteksnya ke climate resilience dari ekosistem. Jadi bagaimana ekosistem itu mampu menghadapi perubahan-perubahan lingkungan dan juga iklim, yang kemudian respon ekosistemnya seperti apa. Ini kira-kira tematik yang masih sangat umum. Nanti kalau teman-teman tertarik silakan next kontak kami. Ada I use your email ya, Joeri, just to if anybody would like to contact you. Ini kontaknya silakan dikontak, nanti kemudian tawarkan idenya, nanti kalau memang kira-kira kami cocok ya kita akan diskusi bersama untuk membahas tentang tema-tema yang bisa kita support nantinya. Nah ini kira-kira gambaran topik-topik yang jadi interest kami. Jadi kalau ada teman-teman yang tertarik ke ngambil LPDP ya nanti kira-kira temanya seperti itu. Tapi kalau Pak saya punya dana sendiri mau penelitian maupun bayar sekolah, silakan langsung kontak. Jadi nggak usah daftar LPDP ya, itu paling murah, paling mudah, bukan paling murah. Oke, saya stop dulu, saya lanjutkan ke Mas Haidar dulu. Mas Haidar, monitor. Nah, Mas Haidar ini ada juga beberapa teman di sini, Mbak Sundari juga pengalaman di LPDP, tapi ini kemarin dari tim S3 minta Mas Haidar untuk bisa sharing sedikit terkait dengan pengalamannya apply LPDP dan juga prosesnya. Monggo Mas Haidar.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Imron atas waktunya.
Bisa ditampilkan wajahnya kah?
Pak ngapunten, ini saya pas lagi di lapangan di Delta
Oh ya,
Mahakam.
oke.
Jadi
Silakan.
sinyalnya kurang bagus, mohon maaf saya belum bisa on cam. Ya, baik, selamat sore Bapak Ibu dan teman-teman semua. Kemarin saya dihubungi oleh Pak Sekprodi, Pak Hero untuk berbagi, untuk sharing begitu terkait dengan pengalaman saya untuk apply beasiswa LPDP. Nah mungkin perlu saya sampaikan bahwa saya apply beasiswa ini di tahun 2021 dan saya menunda untuk menggunakan beasiswa ini selama kurang lebih 2 tahun. Jadi saya baru aktif masuk S3 di tahun 2024 begitu. Nah mungkin dari apa yang saya sampaikan ini bisa jadi sudah ada perubahan-perubahan terkait dengan mekanisme ataupun aturan-aturan dari LPDP. Nah, ini yang saya share itu adalah pengalaman saya di tahun 2021. Nah, mungkin itu yang perlu saya sampaikan di awal. Nah, jadi di tahun 2021 itu saya mendaftar beasiswa LPDP jalur reguler, dan jika saya lihat sekilas di tahun 2026 ini sepertinya sudah lebih banyak ragam beasiswanya, tidak hanya beasiswa reguler, tapi juga ada beasiswa double degree seperti yang tadi Pak Imron sampaikan. Nah, pengalaman saya di tahun 2021 dan sepertinya masih sama di tahun 2026, untuk tahapan seleksi itu ada 3. Yang pertama administrasi, kemudian yang kedua itu tes bakat skolastik, dan yang ketiga itu wawancara. Nah, di tahap administrasi ini, dari pengalaman saya, hal yang cukup menjadi perhatian dari penyeleksi itu adalah yang pertama tes kemampuan bahasa Inggris, karena itu ada batasan minimal begitu yang didapatkan, dan yang kedua adalah esai. Nah, esai ini juga menjadi salah satu penilaian lah untuk menentukan apakah lulus atau tidaknya administrasi, dan juga banyak sekali diulik ketika nanti kita masuk ke tahap interview. Nah, mungkin bagi Bapak Ibu atau teman-teman yang berminat begitu untuk mendaftar LPDP, apalagi skema double degree ini, mungkin bisa memperkuat di bagian esai. Nah, untuk di bagian esai, apa yang bisa saya bagikan adalah di esai yang saya buat, saya mencoba untuk menguraikan tentang tentu pertama mengapa kita memilih program studi yang kita daftarkan ini. Kenapa spesifik prodi ini, kemudian universitas ini. Jadi kita perlu riset juga kenapa kita memilih universitas ini. Dan ini juga nanti akan banyak ditanyakan oleh pewawancara ketika kita masuk ke tahap interview. Nah, kemudian pada saat itu saya juga mencoba untuk menuliskan tentang relevansinya begitu dengan pengalaman-pengalaman saya sebelumnya. Nah, kebetulan untuk saat ini S3 yang saya daftarkan, saya spesifik di bidang kebijakan kehutanan. Nah, saya dalam esai tersebut saya membuat narasi berbagai pengalaman-pengalaman yang pernah saya lakukan untuk riset di bidang kebijakan kehutanan. Dan kemudian saya juga menyambungkannya dengan program-program pemerintah seperti Pak Ali Imron tadi, mungkin ketahanan pangan juga menjadi salah satu prioritas pemerintah pada saat ini. Nah, kalau saya di tahun 2021, saya menekankan pada NDC Indonesia dari sektor Volu. Nah, dan spesifiknya pada ekosistem mangrove di Delta Mahakam. Nah, disitulah saya menyusun esai, saya coba kaitkan begitu dengan program nasional, dengan interest saya, dengan pengalaman saya, dan akhirnya bermuara pada apa riset dan gap riset yang akan saya jawab dari penelitian S3 ini. Nah, itu kurang lebih esai yang saya buat. Dan di akhir esai, saya menekankan apa yang akan saya lakukan, apa setelah selesai S3 ini, apa target yang ingin saya lakukan setelah menyelesaikan S3. Saya juga di situ menekankan saya ingin berkecimpung di dunia akademik, ingin menjadi dosen, dan ya memang tidak bisa dipungkiri bahwa LPDP harus menekankan pada hal-hal apa yang membuat mereka yakin bahwa kita akan tetap di Indonesia, dan kontribusi-kontribusi apa yang bisa kita lakukan di Indonesia. Nah, itu hal-hal yang mungkin perlu di-highlight dalam esai kita. Nah, itu untuk esai. Kemudian untuk tes skolastik, mungkin setiap tahunnya berubah, ada batas-batas minimal yang perlu dilalui begitu, perlu dilampaui begitu untuk lulus tes batas skolastik. Kalau itu saya kurang update lagi berapa angka yang harus dicapai. Tapi kurang lebih tes batas skolastik ini untuk menguji terkait dengan logika kita, penalaran kita, seperti itu. Dan yang terakhir adalah tahap interview. Nah, untuk interview ini, seingat saya ada 3 orang begitu yang menginterview, 2 dari akademisi dan satu itu semacam psikolog HR lah, kurang lebih seperti itu. Dan yang diwawancarai pada saat itu kebanyakan berkaitan dengan apa yang kita tuliskan di esai. Jadi memang esai itu selain menjadi penilaian di administrasi juga menjadi bahan bagi penilai, reviewer untuk melihat apakah sesuai begitu apa yang kita tuliskan dan apa yang kita sampaikan nantinya. Jadi kurang lebih tentang penelitian kita, apa yang akan kita lakukan setelah menyelesaikan studi ini, kemudian mengapa milih prodi ini, kurang lebih seperti itu. Dan untuk benefit dari program LPDP, selain LPDP membiayai sekolah UKT kita, LPDP juga memberikan living allowance per bulannya sesuai dengan daerah di mana kita menjalankan studi. Kemudian juga ada dana keluarga, dana tunjangan keluarga bagi mahasiswa S3. Nah, kemudian juga ada dana buku setiap tahunnya, dana penelitian, dana konferensi, dana lomba internasional, ya mungkin itu untuk benefit dari beasiswa LPDP. Mungkin itu yang bisa saya bagikan, Pak Imron. Mungkin selanjutnya jika ada pertanyaan atau diskusi lebih lanjut, monggo. Makasih Pak Imron.
Makasih Mas Haidar. Aplaus untuk Mas Haidar. Monggo ada pertanyaan atau mungkin Mbak Dari mau ada tambahan, update terbaru yang mau di-share? Ada yang beda nggak dengan yang diceritakan Mas Haidar tadi?
Baik, makasih Pak Imron. Kalau untuk saya berhasil gitu ya menjadi award di LPDP itu di tahun 2025. Namun sebelum berhasil, tapi saya sebelumnya juga mengalami beberapa kegagalan. Jadi bukan hanya sekali mencoba, tapi saya 2 kali mencoba dan ini percobaan yang ketiga kali. Yang saya rasakan ternyata dan kegagalan itu saya alami ketika di tahap wawancara. Jadi setelah tahap wawancara itu gugur setelah itu. Nah, yang saya ambil adalah kegagalan itu berasal dari ini terkait dengan penelitian. Jadi dari 3 panelis ternyata yang paling banyak diulik ketika saya wawancara itu adalah di penelitiannya, di topik penelitian. Jadi saya sadar bahwa kelemahan pertama itu ya awalnya juga ada trouble lain, kemudian yang kedua memang saya kurang mengulik penelitian saya, kemudian di percobaan ketiga saya benar-benar fokus ke situ dan alhamdulillahnya ketika saya fokus ke penelitian, saya belajar dari sebelumnya, saya bisa lolos sampai tahap ini Pak Imron. Itu aja sih Pak.
Oke, terima kasih. Ini tambahan tip ya. Monggo kalau ada pertanyaan, baik yang di online maupun yang di sini. Ada yang atau masih malu-malu? Yang online ada chat itu? Enggak ada. Oke. Saya tawarkan sekali lagi. Oke, kalau belum ada nggak apa-apa. Biasanya masih banyak yang masih master, masih belum jelas lulus atau enggaknya ini. Jadi ya maklum nanti Pak, itu baru setelah itu. Ada juga yang masih bachelor ya, masih jangankan ambil PhD ya, S1 aja belum selesai ya itu. Tapi mulai kebayang ya. Dan terima kasih Mbak Dari, saya kira itu memberi semangat ya. Jadi jangan melihat hanya sukses, tapi ada kegagalan yang penting di situ untuk belajar. Saya kira ya, penting sekali untuk kita. Ya, saya kira kalau tidak ada pertanyaan, kita bisa akhiri acara kuliah umum dan juga sharing tentang LPDP ini. Saya mengucapkan terima kasih. First of all, I would like to thank again to Joeri. Thank you very much for your valuable time to share your knowledge and experience on this topic, and also to everybody who attend this general lecture, and both offline and also online. See you again in the next general lecture. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.